Let the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, this is the first time I've done a sermon here in the fellowship hall. I've been here a long time, but the last time that we had worship here was when they put the new organ in. And those were the days when I spent the entire summer in Truckee, California, so I was not here. So this is my first time. It's kind of intimate in some way. Intimate over here, but it's way back over on that particular side over there. So it's kind of different. But it's kind of good that people don't have the same seats that they always have in the sanctuary. Pastor Gary called Carol Block. Perhaps you know, we announced that Marty Block died back in Wisconsin. And Carol and Marty always sat on Saturday and right next to the sound booth back in the back row of church. And Gary said to Carol, he says, you know, it's kind of a good thing we're worshiping in the fellowship hall because I don't have to look back and see empty seats back there against the wall. I know some of you already claimed spots over here for this summer, and that's so well. In the summertime, and this is my first summer sermon this year, I like to use the Old Testament. That's been kind of my system during my ministry, and so today I want to look at the Old Testament, and it's from what Betty read from the book of Exodus, the second book of our Bible. And the front of the bulletin gives you my sermon title, Five Letters. Is that really clear? C-O-M-P-L. Maybe you figure I never finished my sermon, and maybe that's the case. But in Webster, at least my Webster, there are over 40 words that start with those 5 letters, C-O-M-P-L. So today you can fish a little around and figure out what those letters could complete as far as words are concerned. In fact, one of the words that could be is C-O-M-P-L-E-T-E, complete or complex. So you can think about that. Anyway, we'll get to that in the course of my message today. The people of Israel have just come out of bondage in Egypt. They have crossed the Red Sea. They have been delivered after over 400 years, where they had been slaves when they had been making bricks for the building programs in Egypt. And so they're free for the first time in 400 years. And so out in the wilderness, and we had our choir sing about the wilderness today. Well, they've just gotten into the wilderness. They haven't gotten out of it yet. They're in there for over 40 years. So what do in the wilderness as free people? They C-O-M-P-L-A-I-N. They complain. We use the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible for our gospel today. We often use the NIV, the New International Version, and sometimes the Revised Standard. But those two versions use the word murmured or grumbled. But I wanted to use the word complain because we understand complain, don't we? How many of you have never complained? The people of Israel were freed, but they complained. They had been working 7 days a week in Egypt for the building programs of the Egyptians. And it was during this particular time that God, after He freed them, gave them a Sabbath. A seventh day when they would not have to work. Now, some people get the idea that the reason that the Sabbath day was established was because of this creation story where God worked 6 days and then the seventh day He rested. That's not the case. The Sabbath day was established before the creation account in Genesis was written. And the creation account in Genesis was written was to help establish the reality of the fact that the Israelites finally had a day of rest. But that's a story all in itself. The first lesson that Betty read begins, The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If we only had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger." Now, Moses and Aaron could have said to them, "If you were so well off in Egypt, why don't you go back? If you don't want to go back, stop complaining." Now, they didn't say that. Moses had risked his life. He grew up in Egypt, and he killed an Egyptian. And because he killed an Egyptian, he had to flee out into the wilderness. And in the wilderness, God said to Moses, "I want you to go back to Egypt, where you are a fugitive, and help the people of Israel come out of Egypt." Moses said, "I don't want to do that." God said, "I want you to do that." Moses said, "Well, I don't talk very good." And God said, "I'll give you your brother Aaron. You can tell him what to say, and he can speak well and speak to the people." And that was the case that happened. And that's why the people complained against both Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the lesson goes on. Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining. He's ready to send you back." No, that's not the way it reads. God didn't say he's ready to send you back. Then it goes on, the Lord spoke to Moses and said, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, tonight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread." And that was the manna that we find referred to in the gospel today, where it reads, "Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat." And I'm sure most of you remember that. But the people complain. Complaining people. You can raise your hand. Any of you ever know of a complaining person? How do you like to be around complaining people, huh? It's not a lot of fun. People who can complain about most anything. It's too hot, it's too cold. Same person complains both. It's too wet or it's too dry. And on the golf course, you guys and women, the greens are too fast. The greens are too slow. There's not enough sand in the sand trap. The rough is too heavy. Complaints. Ever hear complaints around the church? Sound system's too loud. You can't hear enough because it's too soft. The organ is too loud. The hymns are not hymns we like to sing, and on and on and on. How about there's not enough parking? You can do that one. That's a legitimate complaint around American Lutheran Church. And of course, right now we're not even into 2016 and politics, all the complaining that we hear already. Complaints. Now, it's not totally bad to complain. Sometimes it's a good idea to complain. Israel complaining resulted in getting quail and getting manna so that they were not hungry anymore. I talked to Tom about an anthem that I really, really love. "I waited for the Lord. He inclined it unto me. He heard my complaint. He heard my complaint." You have permission. You can complain to God. You can complain to God because God cannot handle it. God cannot handle your complaints. And as I say to that, I say to you, be sure. If you want to complain about particularly someone, about something, what they did or what they didn't do, direct your complaint to that person. To that person. Don't complain to someone else. Now, if you don't like what Tom plays, don't complain to one of the pastors about that. Complain to Tom. If our sermon is too boring or too long, don't complain to Tom, complain to us. We can handle that. So many people make their complaints to somebody else, and then the complaint comes back second-handed. If I get a second-handed complaint, if somebody complains to you about me, I pay no attention to that complaint. For you see, I'm the only one that can do anything about you complaining about me. If you complain to me, to Pastor Benson, to Pastor Gary, to Pastor Ulrich, and to Pastor Lane. Do that. Complain to that person. Now, sometimes people complain, and then sometimes probably you've even said, after you've said something, you say, I meant. Did you ever do that? I meant. Well, I tell you what. If you take I meant and add it to COMPL, what do you get? Compliment. Compliment. A compliment is positive. Complaints are not. It's so much nicer to be around people who compliment, is it not? Is it not? People who compliment are happier people. Are happier people. If people of Israel would have complimented Moses and Aaron, they would have been a happier people. And they might have said it this way. The whole congregation of Israel complimented Moses and Aaron for bringing them out of Egypt and taking that great risk. Then they said, now could you possibly find us some food? They could have been a happier people. To compliment is more satisfying than complaining. Yet, complaining is more prevalent than complimenting. How many of you gone to a store and found the compliment department? You ever find a complaint department in a store? Yes, we do. Most people like to be happy. I hope so. And life is so much better when we are a happy people. We're happy to be around. We're happy ourselves. Some of you are perhaps familiar with Charles Swindoll's devotional book, Growing Strong in the Seasons of Life. Some of you have probably read that in the past. It's not a new book. At the end of each devotional, Swindoll gives a challenge for people to do. Usually he did three things. And so today I'm going to follow through with his idea, but I'm only going to do two, to do something. Go through the rest of this day without making a complaint. And then find something to compliment somebody or something about every day of the next week. And I assure you, if you do that, you will be a happier people. So be it.